I have a fun topic for us today.
Yeah. This is going to be an interesting one.
It's not controversial at all.
Not even close.
Everyone agrees on it, probably.
Absolutely.
We're going to talk about abortion.
Everybody okay? Good.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the Identity Crisis Podcast.
Back with another one.
My name is Dylan, and we have...
Jaylen Thompson.
Jaylen, how are you feeling today?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I am doing quite well. I have a fun topic for us today.
Yeah. This is going to be an interesting one.
It's not controversial at all.
Not even close.
Everyone agrees on it, probably.
Absolutely.
We're going to talk about abortion.
Everybody okay? Good.
Okay. Now that your panties aren't in a bunch anymore, we'll be giving you a moment to kind of unbunch them a little bit.
Boxer briefs to be exact.
Oh, yeah, whatever you wear. We ain't judging here. But one thing we're going to talk about today is a specific argument that's used in the abortion topic.
Yep.
If you want to get our views on abortion in a more general sense, we have a link in the description that you can take a look at. We have a podcast episode that we did about a year ago on that.
Yep.
Great fun stuff on that.
Yep.
But one thing I want to talk about is a biblical passage that's often brought up in these conversations.
Yeah.
Now, it's brought up from two primary different groups. It's brought up from secular people who are just trying to quote mine the Bible to see, hey, look, God is actually okay with abortion.
Mm.
And the other perspective is from people who lean a little bit more on the liberal side or identify as progressive Christian, who use arguments like these or this specific passage to say, hey, look, God is okay with abortion.
Yeah. And the progressive Christian side is a little more, it's just a more modernized, like you said, liberal leaning framework for Christianity that appears to be a little more tolerant and a little more lenient.
Yeah.
In terms of its exceptions to rules or even lack thereof in certain situations. So let's dig into it, man.
Absolutely. So this is actually a pretty lengthy passage of scripture. It's going to be Numbers 5, 11 through 31. Now, as much as I love hearing audiobook Bibles and doing long passages being read out loud to me,
Right.
I'm going to give you an opportunity to pause this video and you could read that for yourself because you're probably already getting tired of my voice. But go ahead and read through that. If you're looking for the expedited version, you could just look through 18 through about 28. That's where the bulk of the argument is brought through. So now that you've obviously paused it and read that for yourself, because I know how responsible you are and how much you care about exegeting the text.
And how fast you read.
Exactly, yeah. What I want to do is I want to compare... I want to give a steel man representation of our interlocutors or our friends who we would identify as progressive Christians or just secular people who are just trying to use the Bible to present their position and convince others to change theirs.
Yep.
So I was thinking about this. I think the best representation of the argument would be something like this for a pro-choice position saying that the Bible supports abortion. So in Numbers 5, specifically around 5:21, with the term miscarriage being used, God is prescribing an abortion, and it's an act that's happening before God in a religious setting in a temple. This perspective posits that the potion causes miscarriage if the woman is guilty, the potion that was given to the woman in the ceremony, thus suggesting that some sort of divine intervention in terminating a pregnancy. God's recognition of showing abortion in certain circumstances shows us that God is, at the very least, okay with abortion sometimes under specific conditions. I think that is probably one of the best representations of the argument you can make.
Yes.
I've heard not as great versions of the argument being used. Maybe it's not the steel man, but it's the one I'll hear sometimes where it's essentially, well, see, there's an abortion going here, therefore God's cool with abortion.
Right.
Sometimes they'll passage that with other texts in the Bible where there is recorded action of someone being killed or a young child being killed and stuff like that. Those are a lot more implicit and not direct to the abortion conversation.
Yeah,
you have to kind of smuggle those in.
Yeah, I was about to say, you got to make a pretty big jump to bring in those other passages in regards to the abortion conversation.
Yeah, which is why I often hear this one is probably the strongest case someone can make from a biblical perspective,
right,
in order to give a pro-choice position.
Right.
So the response I would give to this is a few things I wanted to kind of touch base on. So what we have here in Numbers 5:21, I'm going to read starting from 5:20 just to give you a little bit more context. It says, "But if you have gone astray, though you are under your husband's authority, and if you have defiled yourself, and some man other than your husband has lain with you, then let the priest make the woman take the oath of the curse and say to the woman, the Lord make you a curse and an oath among your people when the Lord makes your thigh fall away and your body swell." Now, here's the issue here. In the NIV translation, one of the most common translations used in like the last 10, 20 years, it doesn't say the Lord makes your thigh fall away and your body swell. It said something like you will miscarriage, actually. And so there's a few ways that we can kind of look at this passage. We could look at the literal Hebrew translation of her thigh will rot, or her thigh hath fallen away. We could refer to this is literally referring to her thigh rotting away. The woman will be physically injured or die, perhaps.
Right.
The second option is if it refers to a woman being or becoming barren. So it's a euphemism for her reproductive organs. Or the third option is it's a euphemism for miscarriage. And that's why the translators put it as miscarriage instead. So those are the three primary options. So I want to briefly talk about those a little bit.
Yeah, let's dig into
and go from there. So number one is far and away the most common in English translations. In fact, there's only two translations that put it as miscarriage. And that would be the NIV, which only really happened in a 2011 version, which you can check from a source I have in the description if you do not believe me, and one other translation I believe, which is the CEB. All of the translations of the Bible, and if you look at the original Greek manuscripts or of the Septuagint or any other early manuscript evidence, it doesn't use the term miscarriage.
And it's very interesting to consider too when you hear most skeptics and progressive Christians, whenever they read these verses, they are certain they come from the NIV.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the only one they'll read, conveniently enough.
Right.
Yeah.
So one is the first option I gave you, that it's literally referring to a thigh rotting, is the most common. The second is not as common, but still very common, is the number two option, which was referring to becoming barren. And the third option is only in like those two translations. There's a lot of translations of the Bible. So that's something very important to consider.
Right.
So let's just see what it's like to kind of swirl in option number three, that it's a miscarriage.
Let's play with it and see how it all kind of pans out here.
So let's say it is miscarriage as the translations. We'll just say, just for the sake of the argument, we'll grant that the translation miscarriage is actually the proper one, despite the fact that it's the least common translation.
Yeah.
So the problem is, if it is option number three, that the Hebrew term there is supposed to be miscarriage, it is certainly unclear from the writer and they could have used way more direct language to convey the meaning of a miscarriage. So there's nothing in that whole section of Numbers 5 that even implies that the individual in question is even pregnant.
Hello.
Like, not even a little bit.
They're even talking close.
This is a judgment about adultery.
It's just talking about the idea of a married man or a married woman sleeping with someone that they're not married to, and how to confirm that those allegations are actually true.
Yeah, so why would the term be miscarriage if from context before and after the passage, the entire section on this has nothing to do with pregnancy?
Yeah.
Or at least the individual being pregnant, I should say.
And I suppose if the individual is pregnant, then we know that adultery has taken place.
Yeah, so why are we doing this sort of exercise to see whether or not she was committing adultery or cheating?
Yeah.
So I think on the face value, when you look at it by itself, it's like, all right, this makes a lot of sense. When you zoom out, the context is very, very confusing.
Yes.
So if the term is supposed to be miscarriage, the author did a terrible job in giving context, because we have no idea that the woman is pregnant.
Right.
And, based on the circumstances, it's clear that she's probably not pregnant, because that's the whole point of the ceremony.
Right.
Another thing to consider is, if the woman is found innocent, she is blessed by becoming pregnant. Ergo, she wasn't already pregnant.
Hello.
So how could she be granted a miscarriage if she's going to become pregnant to begin with? If the blessing is to become pregnant, not to continue your pregnancy. The third thing I would point out is there is no separate fate specified for an adulteress who is pregnant versus one who is not pregnant. So if the phrase in question were explicitly a description of a miscarriage, there's a major issue here. There's a giant plot hole.
Right.
Are only adulteresses who get pregnant are punished? That seems kind of arbitrary.
It's only those that get caught. That's what it is.
There it is.
It's only those who get caught.
So those are a few things that I would consider and think about when you're exegeting this passage, when you're trying to see if miscarriage is a viable translation of the term.
Now let's understood, and all of that was fantastic, fantastic breakdown. But let's go into some more of the ancient understanding of the text in regards to maybe perhaps how did the early church or how did the saints of old interpret and understand this passage?
Yeah, fantastic. So I have a few sources that we could take a look at. I'm not going to go into depth on reading the Talmud and these different writings of these ancient Jewish thinkers in general. But I have a source in the description that you are more than welcome to look in and read for yourself. Make sure you read the whole thing, of course. It's not super long, but if you read through, you can kind of see the arguments that are presented and the position that's presented from these early Jewish thinkers. Because after all, I think people like Josephus and people in this ancient Judaic context are going to have a better understanding of the text rather than me, who is like, 2,500 years after the text was written and produced. So that's something I think is really important to consider.
Right.
So ancient Jewish writings such as Josephus, the Targum. Oh man, I'm probably going to butcher these names, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, is it the Targums?
Targums.
I think so.
We could say it like that. The Targums.
Read it right there in the Targums. It's right there. Clear
right there, clear as day, brother. So Jewish writings like from the author Josephus, we have the Targums, the Maimonides. We'll put these on the screen, make it a little easier for you.
Maimonides?
Maimonides.
Yeah.
So again, they're all way closer in language, cultural context, all of that sort of stuff. They unanimously understood that the punishment being specified here is that the adulterous woman would not miscarry, but would die. Indeed, adultery is in most cases considered a capital crime in the Torah, which gives us a better understanding.
Right.
And so even earlier, the Septuagint translators, circa around 200 BC, also did not leave any reference to pregnancy or miscarriage in their translation of the passage. Their words can be rendered in English as such. And this water that brings the curse shall enter your belly to swell the belly and make thigh fall to pieces, or make your thigh fall to pieces, I should say. So those are the general perspectives on the ancient Judaic perspective in general. But we might still think, okay, is there any way that we can apply this to the abortion conversation in general today? And I think the problem is if we still are taking number 3 after these giant considerations, as the more plausible reading, using the term miscarriage rather than the other two we talked about before, it's just not analogous to abortion whatsoever.
No, not even close.
Even if we say all the evidence and things I've brought forward aren't convincing, and you're still convinced that the term miscarriage is the proper rendering, going against the sort of unanimous consensus of the ancient Judaic thinkers, and looking at it in context and everything, it's just not analogous to abortion. So, for example, the water given to the woman on trial is not an abortifacient. I can't even pronounce that word right.
Right. It's in a
abortion-inducing toxin.
Yes,
or
abortion-inducing medication, if you will,
or medical care, as we call it today.
I didn't know you were going there.
But well, that's the term. It's proper medical care is what's the term used for abortion.
Yes,
so I understand the linguistic territory taking there, but
right.
Anyways, jokes aside, it's not an abortion-inducing substance that's given to the woman. And without divine intervention, the concoction wouldn't even be efficacious.
Right.
For example, if the woman was innocent, there would be no effect. And in fact, she would have a blessed outcome by becoming pregnant or having some sort of blessing in that aspect. If she's guilty, we're expecting a miracle to demonstrate the guilt by her belly swelling up.
Yeah, and her thigh falling to pieces.
Whether way you look at one or two, either her thigh would have some sort of actual damage, she would have reproductive damage, or her belly would swell to showcase those things. So that's the first option. And I think something smuggled in here, not a giant thing to consider, but it is a little bit of a big deal. But I think the idea here is that, well, if God is prescribing abortion, which I clearly think he is not, it's giving the idea that, well, because God did it, then therefore it's okay for everyone to do.
Yeah, and that's just, I mean, that's such a major jump.
Yeah, it's a giant jump. For example, just because God does something in the Bible, that doesn't mean that I fully understand the reasons behind it, the motives behind it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in the same position authority-wise or morally speaking.
Not even.
And so, for example, God flooded the known world in Genesis 7 and 8.
Yep.
That doesn't follow that, flooding the world is a great thing to do.
Right.
I should be doing that. Where's my fire hose?
I'm upset with the moral condition of humanity right now, so I'm gonna
take it into my own hands. Yeah,
that's just
not how that works.
Nope.
So I think finding things like Jesus was flipping tables in the temple. Therefore, when I go to mass next week, I'm going up to that communion table and I'm flipping stuff because I don't like how they're running it. Well, okay, hold on there, bud.
I'll think this through for a second.
Right. Let's talk about this. You're in a little bit of a different position than the Son of God. Let's humble ourselves and talk about this.
Well, wait a minute, Dylan. He was a man like me.
Exactly. So you can kind of see the point that I'm making.
It's goofy.
So I think just to kind of recap in general, there's three primary perspectives that are brought forth. Even if we adopt the third phrase or the third perspective that it's talking about a miscarriage, which is the minority view of translations, it's the minority view of most biblical theologians and scholars.
Yes.
Even if we grant it for the sake of argument, it just doesn't fit the context. It doesn't fit the rest of the passage in general.
Not even.
Doesn't make sense. And it's, even if we did all of that and ignore all the evidence, it still doesn't apply to abortion today.
Agreed, 100%. And did you want to talk about the war passages much at all? Or, I mean, we
kind of touch base on it in general. I mean, a lot of times people will say, look at these things that happened when Israel was in war.
Right.
Therefore, abortion's okay. And I think no matter what you smuggle in, there's just nothing explicit or really implicit that applies to abortion.
Agreed.
Yeah, at best, it just makes you want to look at those passages in more depth and understand, why was Israel at war? Why are they killing other individuals in general? And I just don't see how that's really applicable in that sense. So that's why I said I wanted the conversation to be centered around this one, because this, on the face of it, seems to be most easily applied to the conversation. I've heard it triumphantly quoted by people of like the Young Turk Show or from progressive Christians and all of that sort of stuff. And it just doesn't fit when you look at a fuller picture of the passage.
Not even. But what do you guys think? Did we get it right? Did we get it wrong? Is Dylan talking out the side of his neck and I'm aiding him in doing so? Maybe. What do we think here? Maybe we misinterpreted the scripture, claiming that they misinterpreted the scripture.
Yeah.
Let us know in the comments section.
We misinterpreted the misinterpretation.
Yeah. That sounds, did we? We got it wrong with them getting it wrong.
I don't know. Let us know if we did.
I don't know. Yeah, you guys will tell us. You guys will be the final judge. You tell us what we did. Until next time, thank you for watching. And I am your co-host, Jaylen Thompson.
Dylan Schweitzer.
And as always, for the kingdom, we out.